Hi, and welcome to my review of the Toshiba R8 series, specifically the R835P50X. I purchased this laptop after seeing a Toshiba video, one needing the SATA and HDMI port externally. After doing a lot of reviews and seeing a Toshiba video from Toshiba stating in the entire series of notebooks, not any specific model or feature set, but the entire laptop design for this R8 series uses a copper heatsink instead of aluminum core heatsink. Upon getting the notebook, I found out that was not the case. It actually doesn't come. It does in fact come with an aluminum heatsink, and I'm not too thrilled about that for many reasons. I thought honestly Toshiba had come back. I wanted to do a review when I first got this. I was hoping to do a review and being ecstatic completely and not having any faults with it. To give you a baseline, I've had Toshiba since they basically first came out with, I believe, the T1200 back in 89, yeah, 89, somewhere around there. And most recently the 2435 series and 5205 series notebooks. The 2435 is still churning away. It's Pentium 4, 2.4 gigahertz with a copper heatsink. The two notebooks, 5205 series, I have two of those, which are high-end Toshiba notebooks, actually have both failed due to overheating of the GPU, thus resulting in basically the GPU chip is actually coming off the motherboard. So heat actually plays a huge part in notebook design, and that's one thing Toshiba was touting in this series, that it has a thermal management design that integrates the copper core heatsink. I'm going to switch over to the Toshiba video and let you watch a portion of that where they discuss the design and how the copper heatsink plays an important role versus aluminum. And then I'm going to bust open this one and you can see for yourself what in fact this one has in it. And then I'm going to go into a little bit more about thermal management on notebooks.
Hello. I'm Andy French from Toshiba. I have a question for you. How is it possible to manufacture a laptop that's exceptionally powerful and fully featured, yet light and thin, and that won't cost you a fortune? That's a problem we at Toshiba have tried to solve for quite a long time, but we think we've done it. A crucial part of the answer is in a revolutionary cooling technology. Let's take a closer look at how this works. As usual, there's a fan inside the system. What's not so usual is its size. Because it's relatively large, it only has to spin at 4,500 revolutions per minute. Slower speed means quieter working. Also unusual is that this fan actually sucks cool air in rather than blowing hot air out. It creates an airflow inside the computer. Toshiba engineers used high-speed signal simulation technology to create an extremely efficient motherboard. It consists of 8 layers compared to 4 or 6, which is the norm. That way we could make the system board smaller, but also optimize the layout of the components in terms of their thermal characteristics. Here's an example. For engineering reasons, the CPU is normally placed in the middle of the system board, surrounded by linked components. But we were able to break the rules and put the CPU and other hot components closer to the cooling system. Heat from the CPU is transported by a heatsink to the copper cooling grid. Aluminium is normally used here, but copper is a much better heat conductor, so it moves the heat more effectively to the cooling airflow from the fan. These technologies are now utilized in Toshiba's new range of 13.3-inch, 14-inch and 15-inch business laptops.
Before we go too much further, I just want to go into Toshiba. They say that the laptop has a honeycomb design with the magnesium. That I only found really was on the plates, which actually is where you really need it. The bottom plate of the laptop does not actually, it's not honeycomb, nor does it really need to be honeycomb, but I just figured since they stress the fact that it's honeycomb, and don't show you, I figured I'd show you that it's indeed not honeycomb. Now onto the inside of the laptop. I do want to apologize ahead of time if it gets a little jumpy. I'm recording with one hand, controlling another light source with the other, and trying to zoom. So anyway, as they say, you can see everything is the same exact as what they say, except for the aluminum heatsink, which we'll get to in just a second here. However, but they do say it's got the big fan. Honestly, it's not as big as some of the other fans I've seen in other computers. It does appear to blow air on the top and the bottom of this board. I have yet to take the board out of the laptop yet. However, I will be doing that here now, especially since the other issues I have found, i.e. the aluminum heatsink, that they stress is copper in their video. As you can see, it's not even soldered in place, and I'll get to the soldering in a second, but it's held on there with friction. And if you know anything about aluminum and copper, sorry, I'm trying to focus. If you know anything about aluminum and copper, they don't expand and contract the same way. Copper doesn't expand and contract as much as aluminum does. So while the heat pipe itself might not be expanding as much, the actual fins that are touching the heat pipe are going to expand and contract. So over time, it's actually going to lose contact. Some of the other heat sinks I've seen out there, even from Toshiba, that have a copper heat pipe with aluminum heatsink are soldered on. And as much as I'm not a fan of solder for thermal conductivity, it is better than this. I've actually thought about getting this soldered to do a before and after test in controlled ambient temperatures. But as you can easily see, this thing is not copper, as they say. In fact, it is aluminum, which is not as good as they even say. And in this laptop, you actually really need that the copper finned heatsink. As you can see, the plate that actually attaches to the CPU is very thin. It's nothing like most other heat sinks. Just to give you an idea, here is a heat sink and heatsink pipe for a Toshiba 5205 series. And as you can see, and I'll put a picture in here. Maybe I don't have to. You can see that it's actually soldered on there. So it's not going anywhere. And that actually, as much as it's only touching one side, that solder joint actually is making up for it quite a bit. So, and you can see it's got a lot larger heat plate, or whatever you want to call it, that hooks up to the heat pipe, and it is, I believe it was actually lapped from the factory, and over the years, this has actually been in a drawer and abused and used with R&D testing for other light sources, so it's been sanded and screwed up ever since then. But that gives you an idea of what you really kind of want in a laptop. This could work if this had a copper heatsink attached to it, soldered, or you know, either soldered in the core here or placed on the top or bottom. I'm assuming that they needed to go in the middle, just the way the board is laid out. If you look, the board is pretty much level, so it couldn't go on the bottom of the board, and going on the top probably is not going to happen either due to the size of the laptop. However, they could have soldered this and made a lot better connection. And I'll go ahead and take this off just in here in a second, but to give you an idea how much of an issue this can actually, with having a thin plate like this, can impose on you. This laptop and any other laptop I've dealt with before generally has you know, a thick plate like this, and I use what is called pyrolytic graphite sheets for my thermal bonding material, and it's basically just an extremely thin sheet of graphite, and this has a better thermal transfer than aluminum or anything else. Let me put that back on because it's covering up one of the serial numbers for my WiMAX. I'd switch this laptop from the stock, as I'll show you in the pictures, from the stock goop, which I don't even want to call it thermal grease because it was already drying, as you'll see very detailed in the pictures. I switched up from that, and I was hard pressed to get the CPU core temperature up to anything past 75%, which is about 75 to 80 Celsius. When I switched over to the PGS sheet, CPU temperatures under heavy load, obviously, two 720p movies and rendering a 720p movie in the background, AVC HD format. the CPU is getting up to 99 degrees Celsius. I've since figured out why, and that is basically because this heat plate, or whatever you want to call it, is not flat and actually has a curve to it. So even so, this don't want to uncover that. So even though this works on this type of heat plate with any standard CPU, this particular heat plate is going to require thermal grease. So I've actually gone back to Arctic Silver 5. I've never actually really used this brand before. I've used other brands of silver. Here's a piece of the pyrolytic graphite sheet if I can get it off. There. It's kind of flexible. It will break in half. As you can see, it just snapped. So it's very thin, and it's just basically graphite sheets. It's got the best thermal conductivity out there, other than basically, I think gallium might be a little bit better. I'm not sure which one of those two. I'll go ahead and take this off and show you how thin this is. And you can, in going back to the flexing, you can see that this flexes. So as this heats up and it goes from the hot spot, the hot point of the CPU might actually become a wider gap, which is one reason why I'm going back to the thermal grease, so it will take over that. My other issue with this laptop, it has no heatsink at all. I honestly haven't even read this chip to see if it's the bridge or GPU. I'm not sure. The GPU might be underneath it, but I don't see any heatsink on there, which is actually not the greatest thing, because if you look at example Toshiba 5205, I told you I had two of the dead laptops. If you look at a 5205 motherboard, you can actually see that it's got a heatsink on it. You know, but this one obviously doesn't. And then the heatsink plate and fan would sit right here. What kills this laptop, or killed this laptop, was there was no heatsink at all for the NVIDIA GPU. So when the laptop actually gets hot, if you push on this, when the screen starts going bad, you actually can get the screen to come back. So this is obviously overheating and popped off the board. So thermal management in a laptop is key. Just a couple other things I wanted to show you and go over on this laptop before we go any more into that. The CD-ROM drive, this is not a negative, this is not a bad what I'm about to show you, it's just different. The CD-ROM drive is actually just there like it is. There's no cover for it at all, and the reason why is to make it a lower profile. The problem that you could see is if you're in a dusty environment, your CD drive might become dirty a little bit faster than normal, so you'll have to keep an eye on it. If it stops recording or reading a CD perfectly, just go ahead and go inside and clean it. There's, as you can see, honeycomb on the palm rest, which gives a lot of rigidity. I wouldn't get upset at this thing and give it a few taps while it's writing to a CD, because obviously you could spin it down or do other damage if it flexes too much. And then it has the standard SATA hard drive in it. I'll pop that off because I don't want to show you a serial number, no offense. The standard 2.5-inch hard drive SATA. And you can see that everything is tied together with the ribbon cables back to this motherboard. It's actually, the motherboard itself is from here to here, and that's it. There is a USB USB SATA port here, HDMI. You got your power connection that's off the motherboard. A lot of companies are doing this, and they have been doing it for a while, so that way when you break your adapter port, you don't destroy your motherboard. Old laptops back in the day, and some cheap ones actually are tied to the motherboard, which is a real bummer. You can see over here that it's got the phone jack, actually modem jack, sorry, this laptop doesn't come with a modem. Another USB port, the microphone, and line out, and everything's tied again with ribbon cables. Honestly, I'm not a fan of ribbon cables in movement application, but these are not moving, so you don't have a problem with that. The one thing I did notice that it doesn't line up perfectly, so if you line it up, you'd actually over a screw hole. However, this doesn't actually get screwed into anything, so I'm not sure what that screw point was for. And overall, it's a pretty cool laptop design. Let me see if I can. Oh, that one's not going to come off. It's screwed down. But at first, honestly, that kind of got me that it was open like that. But then I was thinking about it, and the laptop's pretty much sealed up. And if you keep it clean, just get a can of air and blow through it every so often, you're going to be okay, I think. But yeah, let me go ahead and take this off, and then I'll show you a little bit more about this heatsink. So we got the heatsink off, and as you can see, it's got the Intel i3 core processor in it. You actually see in the videos, like I said again, the thermal paste that they had on there that was already drying out within a week after getting it. I will say this laptop, when you first get it, reeks. When it first powers up, that's everything just mushing or whatever, just typical burn-in. That does go away, so don't worry about that. I want to say this thing's been running for about a week and I still smell it, so it's just not as bad as what it once used to be. I was going to also take the motherboard off. I decided not to. I ended up taking that off, got the screws out, and it was just more of a mess than I wanted to do it just for show. But I did look, and it does have air cooling going across the bottom and then coming out across the side right here to go along with the heatsink. You can't really see anything. But anyway, onto the heatsink. This is where the magic is supposed to happen, but it doesn't, in my opinion, at least. You can see my PGS sheet that I had cut to fit this, and this actually works on any other processor that uses a thick plate that's pretty much lapped already or has a close finish. Even though there's minor imperfections in metals and you don't get perfect contact, this stuff does squish, and on all the other laptops it did better than most silicone greases and some of the other higher end ones. I've never tried the Arctic Silver 5 versus this in a standard application. We'll try that probably on the Acer to test it, because it has a thick plate, and we'll see which one does a better job. This one can't, because this plate actually flexes and is not perfectly flat, so it doesn't even cover this mirrored finish, which is actually a solid, completely solid, has no flex to it at all, because it just doesn't. This, however, does have flex, and as it heats up, it will flex more and more, so you need the thermoconductive instead of the PGS sheet. But as you can see, if you look close, let me see how you can actually see that the heat pipe is soldered to this plate. So why couldn't they, as much as I chinsed out and went to aluminum over here, why couldn't they do that, here? Because you can actually solder that. It's a tight fit, but you can actually solder that. And as you can see, it's frictioned in there. And over time, that aluminum will heat up, expand, push down on the copper, and then basically deform itself, and then cool down, and then create a gap. So eventually, there'll just be a gap in there, and this will actually just end up falling off. I only have one hand, so I don't really want to move it and have it fly off and not be able to put it back on. But I was able to move it a little bit off camera, and was not keen on that at all, because if I can move it, that means it's going to come off eventually, and it's extremely light. It's beyond aluminum. It's an alloy. This I can't tell really, because it's got too much weight on it, if this is a better alloy or not. But this actually kept the CPU cool on the 5205, as well as on any other laptop that I've seen aluminum with copper heat pipe with a heat plate. It does a pretty good job. On the Acer, when it's rendering and it's doing hardcore, I got it up to 60 degrees Celsius, 60 Celsius, which is hot, but it's not that hot. But again, they can fix this. Toshiba can bring out the aluminum core one that they had touted on their video ad, and that should fix a lot of the problems. However, I would like to see a Toshiba come out with a different heat plate design, a little bit thicker, so it has a little bit more rigidity, especially in these newer dual core processors, quad core, whatever you want to call it, any of them. They do get hotter, and the big thing about it is pulling the heat away. Not so much how cool can you keep it, but how fast can you get the heat pulled away. In this application, you're not going to be able to, when it gets hot, it's going to the copper is going to deform, and you're just going to be up a creek down the road. You just have to bear in mind, if you buy this laptop, if they don't fix this issue, I wouldn't give this laptop but 4 or 5 years before you start having bad thermal management problems, and that's going to be because the radiator is going to be coming away from the heat pipe. I'm going to actually do I'm in contact actually with Toshiba, the public relations head manager, regarding their notebook series, and we're trying to find out, because he even came back and said, yeah, no matter where the video was filmed or whatnot, this should be a system-wide, worldwide design. It's not, and he even agreed that it's not part of the you know, English or Great Britain series. You know, that it's part of the whole design to have a copper heatsink, and in fact it has aluminum. I am extremely distressed about this issue. Obviously, I cannot return this thing back to the store since I've taken it apart, but I do hope that Toshiba does fix this. At a minimum, gives me a copper heatsink and start shipping them with copper heatsinks, and provide an option for anyone that already owns this to switch up to a copper heatsink. As well as, before they even do that, I would hope that Toshiba would come out with a thicker heat plate. They can do this change, this design change, without affecting the laptop design. All they would have to do is just go with a little bit thicker copper, and they could realistically fit this, just a hair smaller heat plate in the same size that they can fit this one. If I actually put it on there, you can see that it doesn't exceed the memory card height. And if I put this one back on, you can see that it's just a hair below the memory card height. However, the mounting brackets are at height, so if they just came off level off this one, we would be perfectly fine. So again, I hope this helps everybody, and I hope this really helps Toshiba understand you know, what the customers are going to go through. But as you can see, there's not a drop of solder on there to keep it in place. And if they just put a piece of solder there and a piece of solder there, I'd be happier. But it's still not going to stop the problem that you're going to have here with expansion, contraction, and eventual loss of contact in that. So actually, before we go, I want to first just quickly go over, this is the Intel, upside down, it's not how we want to see anything. It's the Intel Wi-Fi / WiMAX integrated chipset for Mini PCI Express. It's a 6250 series Wi-Fi and WiMAX. I believe this is going to take over the high-speed broadband world, because LTE from Verizon can't go within Wi-Fi in a single chip format like the PCI Express. It's completely different technologies, whereas Wi-Fi and WiMAX are, oh, I don't want to say identically the same, but they're pretty close. Ooh, I didn't even notice that there is a third antenna port that is not hooked up. I wonder if we can add one to give it even more diversity. You can actually see that right there. It had a port option. We'll have to look into that. That might be cool to add a third antenna to that. But going back to it, as you see from my other videos, I review the Sierra Wireless Overdrive Pro and their 250U, I believe, card. Both of them in, I'll put the picture up in the video, where this laptop sat, they would get 1 bar and 0 bars, no connection at all. This laptop can sit in that location and get 3 bars of the same WiMAX signal. So the antenna design, the Intel Wi-Fi chip, I think is superior to the Beacon chipsets that are in the Sierra Wireless's devices. This was actually a cool side note. After I got the laptop, I found it had WiMAX in it this way. So I really wanted WiMAX. I just was not going to have their Sierra Wireless products tarting out on me, not working. But hope you enjoy your laptop if you get one. Hopefully by the time you get one, they do fix this or give you an option. Honestly, I would not recommend this laptop without a copper heatsink. I'm stuck with it. I actually do hope that if Toshiba says no, they're not going to be fixing this for anyone, and they're going to continue selling it the way it is. I hope they buy my laptop back for me and they can have it back, because I can't send it back to the store. It's not fair to the store. But I do hope that they either fix it or take my laptop back, and I will go find another laptop. But I do see Toshiba, if they fix this issue in their laptops and add a heatsink to this, I did look underneath the laptop and didn't see another chip that looks similar to this, and I haven't looked at the numbers to know whether or not this is a part of the motherboard or the Intel GPU. I'm going to go ahead and assume it's the GPU, but don't know yet. But they should have added a heatsink to this, and since I didn't see anything else underneath it that was the size of this, I would assume that this is a GPU. These are photos taken out of the video from Toshiba's video. These pictures show you the heatsink, they're just photographs. You can see the goop here in the next couple slides that is starting to dry. You can see that there's peaks from it that I was able to take up. You can see right there, it's pretty well dry, that chunk there. Now coming up is the two laptops that did the heat test side by side. Coming up is the Toshiba. As you can see, it's 99 degrees Celsius. And here's the Acer running at about 60 degrees Celsius, high 60 degrees Celsius. And here's the Acer, the Toshiba after cooldown. And the Acer after cooldown. This is using the Arctic Silver 5 in the Toshiba and after cooldown. Here we have the Acer's heatsink array. Here we have a Toshiba 2435 still churning away today. And its copper core heatsink from Toshiba, obviously. Thank you for watching the video. And here's a Toshiba 5205s. And here is the clear Wi-Fi, clear WiMAX signal strength 3, where I used to get 0 or 1 in the same location. Thank you for watching the video. Be safe today.